Pearson, and I'm the writer in residence at the Watermill Theatre. I hope you're all well, I hope you're all staying healthy, staying at home, and in the meantime the Watermill have asked me to do a short video just talking about the life of a playwright, how I got into this line of work, how you might go about becoming a playwright and getting your play staged, and giving you some insight into how I work with them as playwright in residence. So to begin with my career, I started studying literature at university, and I was very bookish, loved writing, but really struggled to finish things. I think because I lacked confidence that what I was doing was any good. And it can just seem really intimidating, I think, when you're young to write massive works of fiction in any form. And so it wasn't really until after university that I started taking writing more seriously and kind of finding my way to the end of pieces. And the first play that I ever had staged was by a company called Reading Between the Lines. They're now called Rabble Theatre, based in Reading. They have a competition which is a 24-hour plays. So you are given a theme and the last line of the previous playwright's work, because there are 4 of you doing it sequentially. You have 24 hours to write the play, and then you hand it over, and a director and a team of actors have to then stage the play. So I had that on in 2015, and at that time the Watermill sent some people along to see it, and then they very kindly offered me the chance to write one of their youth theatre plays after that. And then at the same time, I was living in London then, and I was starting to experiment with having short plays on in scratch nights and short play competitions, things like that, in fringe theatres around London. So I was getting used to the idea of how you work with the director and actors, how you go about writing for the stage as opposed to a short story or a film or any other medium. So that would be kind of a top tip, I suppose, to begin with, is if, like me, you find it very intimidating to think about writing a whole full-length play, begin with short things. Find directors you like to just have coffee with, actors. You don't have to live in London. I don't anymore. You can find people making amazing work all over the country, and just start seeing your work produced, because you learn so much when you start to see it, and that's whether it's in a tiny shoebox theatre above a pub or on a main stage in any of our wonderful UK theatres. It's just about what you learn when you see something being produced. So after working with the Watermill on a few of their youth theatre shows and also having work produced in London, I did the Royal Court Theatre's new Playwright scheme, which was brilliantly helpful. And that's another tip I would give, I suppose, is that places like the Court and the Bush and lots of other brilliant theatres have schemes for people learning how to be a playwright. And these, I think, they give you confidence and they give you new skill sets, and you meet lots of other writers, because it can be lonely working on your own so much, so it's really nice to meet other people. And so they're just a really good opportunity to learn and grow. And so, I did the Royal Court course, kept on working in London, signed with a literary agent, and have just kind of kept progressing and been working with the Watermill throughout that on various productions of different sizes. What's been absolutely brilliant, I mean, there's many things that have been brilliant about working with the Watermill, but working on their youth theatre shows and working on their schools tours has meant that I've been lucky enough to write for 2 or 3 actors, and then also gigantic casts of young people. And that's something that I really value, because a lot of the time when you're working in a kind of fringe theatre environment, you have very real budgetary constraints and not many actors, and so it's been an amazing way to kind of stretch the craft doing youth theatre as well. It's such a different ask. So that's kind of where I'm at in my career. I'm still working under commission for people, trying to find new work. I'm still quite early on in my career, really, and just continuing to make connections and try to get better, try to do new things. and my new play Camp Albion was supposed to be on at the Watermill this spring. Obviously that's now been postponed, but I'm very excited to work with the Watermill on this. And so what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about how that works, how I went from having this idea to working with the theatre, eventually being commissioned by them to put it on, and how we then found a director and went through the process. So I think it was probably 2017 I came to Paul Hart, the artistic director of the Watermill, with an idea that I wanted to write a play about the Newbury Bypass campaign. So I grew up in Newbury, and I remember my family being involved with this campaign kind of tangentially, but I remember it being big news at the time. And then I'd sort of rediscovered articles about it and photos of the protests, and just thought it seemed like this incredible, dramatic, relevant, interesting idea that I wanted to explore. So the way you might work as a playwright, if you have an established relationship with a building like the Watermill and you have an idea, you'd have a meeting with people, you'd kind of pitch it to them, and if they seem interested, you might go away and write up your ideas for them. They might then discuss it with some other members of their team. And so, yeah, we were kind of knocking ideas around for a while. I kind of wrote maybe a synopsis or a treatment or something, and we eventually got to the point where I was given a seed commission to write the first act of the play. At this point, we were also talking about the fact that this play would suit the rural tour slot, which usually means 3 actors, and the kind of set that you can pack up and tour around, because it goes to both the Watermill and to kind of schools and village halls in the area. And that's quite an important stage in the process, I suppose, is that when you're working with a theatre, there's always going to be specifications to do with the slot you're working on. So that will shape the way you write it. It's a completely different play today, because I knew that I'd be writing for 3 actors and that it would have to be a kind of fleet of foot touring production than it would have been in a different context. So plays come about in lots of different ways. There's this situation where you might pitch it to a theatre, or there's a scenario where maybe you're writing the whole thing and submitting it to a theatre's literary department or to a competition, and in that situation you've no idea where it will be produced, so you can just let your imagination run wild, I suppose. Or there are situations where a theatre might come to you once you're a bit established and say, you know, we're thinking of a 2-hander set in this kind of context or about this theme. Do you have any ideas for us? So because theatre is such a collaborative process, you're always thinking about elements of production, sound design, music, things like that. So it's not just like when you write a novel alone and you're completely in your own mind. So we had got as far as me writing a first act, and then we got our brilliant director, Georgie State, on board. I'd worked with Georgie before on D-Day 75, which was another Watermill community project, so we knew that we got along and we've used to each other's working styles. And so the way that a writer would usually work with a director is you would send them drafts, they will give you notes, you'll have, you know, long chats over coffee about where you see the production going. And so Georgie and I started working together on the script, and I kind of went through more and more drafts. And as you tend to go on with notes on scripts, they become more focused to the production. So to begin with, they're about fundamental storytelling things like character and theme and the narrative drive. And then by the time you're getting close to rehearsals, they become, we need to change this scene because this person won't have time to change, or we think the musical cue would be better here, or that's not going to work with our set budget, so if you could take that bit out or rearrange it somehow. So it's always a mixture of the kind of narrative and the practical together in how you take notes. So then we work with the Watermill's team on the production side of things. We have a brilliant set designer who shows us a model box of the set she has planned. We have people thinking about sound and music and all different elements. And that's sort of the stage we were at with this production. We were about to go into auditions to cast the show, which is always a really fascinating part of the process, because you see so many wonderful actors coming in and they can really help you make the characters come alive. And so after that you would go into rehearsal. And the way that the writer generally interacts with rehearsals is you wouldn't necessarily be there for every day. You are for some, or if you want to be, but you come in and you're part of the kind of creative mind meld that happens in a rehearsal room. You kind of oversee things and maybe take edits on the script as the director is working, and you kind of maybe you have an evolving sense of a character or a situation based on what you're seeing happening in the room. So it's really nice, I think, to be responsive to that and kind of keep the script up to date. You might find ways, for example, of cutting 3 pages of dialogue because you can say it so much in a single gesture, and you wouldn't know that until you're in a room with the actors and the director. So yeah, and then that's kind of your role done. You get to tech and the script should be set by then, and they're working out just the very logistical things about how to stage the production, lighting cues, sound cues, things like that. So at that stage you might kind of back off as a playwright and sit around nervously waiting for your opening and press night, and that's when you get reviews for your show. You get to go and see it with all your friends and family, and then by that stage you're often working on a new show or several new shows and ideas, and so you kind of move on with production. Obviously we never got that far with Camp Albion because of the postponement, but we're all really excited for getting back to that stage when the Watermill reopens. So I hope this has been interesting or useful in any way. And I'd just like to say thanks so much to the Watermill, because it's such a brilliant team of people. It's a really strange, uncertain time to be working in theatre, but they've been brilliant at keeping in touch with all the freelancers like me who work with them and with their audiences. And I know we're all really excited to see them open their doors again. Thanks very much.